Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. So over the weekend, President Donald Trump said some extremely disturbing things in a Meet the Press interview. And I had a lot of folks contact me and ask me a simple question. You see it on the bottom of the screen. Has Trump replaced our democracy with authoritarianism? I'm going to answer that question toward the end of this video, but I want to walk you through things because it's not a simple question. All right, so I want to play a portion of that Meet the Press interview, and you'll see why this alarmed so many people, including myself. So now let's go over and watch that video.
Let's talk about this because obviously you've had a back and forth with the Supreme Court. In a 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court directed your administration to facilitate the return. You've talked about this in the past of Kilmar Abrego Garcia from a prison in El Salvador whose deportation your administration called an administrative error. You said in a recent interview you could bring him back, but you won't. Are you defying the Supreme Court, sir?
No, I'm relying on the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, who's very capable, doing a great job, because I'm not involved in the legality or the illegality. I have lawyers to do that, and that's why I have a great DOJ. We have a great one. We had a very corrupt one before. Now we have a great one. And they're not viewing the decision the way you said it. They don't view it that way at all. They think it's a totally different.
Okay, so let me talk about a couple of things right here because he is actually right about a couple of things. And let me explain this to you. So with the Garcia case, there was a protection order that basically kept him from being, or should have kept him from being deported to El Salvador, but he was deported to El Salvador nonetheless. So his family sued, and a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to both facilitate and to effectuate his return. And the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to get involved. So the Supreme Court did get involved, and they issued a memorandum opinion. Now, that is basically where no one signs the opinion, or at least the majority who typically would write the opinion. No one representing the majority signed the opinion. All right, so the majority essentially said that the government has to facilitate his return, but they did not co-sign the effectuate part of the order. They basically said that the case needs to be remanded. In fact, they remanded the case back to the lower court judge and asked her to clarify what she meant by effectuate. Those words mean two different things. Facilitate means to assist. Effectuate means to make it happen. And the court said essentially that the government doesn't have to make it happen, but they should facilitate it. And they said that the lower court may have went beyond her authority, ordering the executive branch to effectuate his return because that may be foreign policy, which the president does have the authority to do. That said, federal courts can still declare whether some foreign policy that Trump comes up with is constitutional or not. So right now, there's sort of a limbo. The lower court judge has not explained what she meant by effectuate. So there is that pending order that SCOTUS did sign on to, that part of the order that said facilitate. So as of right now, the Trump administration is not in defiance of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court basically gave them sort of an out, at least for now, until the lower court judge says what she meant by effectuate. Now, that said, his due process rights were still violated by the Trump administration because they deported him without giving him due process, without allowing him to go in front of a judge and argue his case, and the judge decides what happened, and then they deport him or not. So that didn't happen. So you could certainly make the argument that they still violated his due process rights, but you really can't legally make the argument that they're quite in defiance of SCOTUS, because SCOTUS says facilitate, but you don't have to effectuate until we know what the lower court judge meant. And also, when he says that, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know the legality, I'm depending on Pam Bundy, the Attorney General, I would agree with that as well. I know when we're representing people, we want those people to follow our legal instructions and interpretation. And so we advise them really not to even have the conversation that Trump is having with Meet the Press, so that, the person, our client, doesn't say anything they shouldn't say. So Trump had the interview, and he was right to say, my lawyers don't see it the way you see it. I'm going to do what they tell me, whatever they advise me. So he's right in that as well. All right. But there's another part of this interview that is most troubling, and that's what I'll comment on here in just a second. So let's go back and let's listen to the rest of this.
Well, you say you have the power to bring him back, though. Your attorney general says, quote, that's up to El Salvador. Just to put a fine point on this, do you have the power to bring Abrego Garcia back as the Supreme Court?
Well, I have the power to ask for him to come back if I'm instructed by the attorney general that it's legal to do so. But the decision as to whether or not he should come back will be the head of El Salvador. He's a very capable man.
Well, and your attorney general has said the issue is with that word facilitate. Will you seek clarification from the Supreme Court? Do you need to go back to the Supreme Court?
We may do that. I was asking about that. We may do that. There are some people that say, bring him back, put him in trial, and you get him out right away, because you see what happened just this morning. Tapes came out, horrible tapes from his wife. You don't get much worse than that. You don't get, he seems certainly like a very dangerous, very bad person, but even the wife, who was so afraid, she was afraid to talk, and all of a sudden tapes got released this morning that were devastating to him.
And this is the point, sir, about due process. The Constitution says every person, citizens and non-citizens, deserve due process. Why not push to have him come back, present all of that evidence in court, let a judge decide?
Well, I'll leave that to the lawyers, and I'll leave that to the Attorney General of the United States.
Well, let me say here, this is not that really critical thing that he said that I'm going to talk about in just a second. But I do definitely want to emphasize the importance of due process. And as Kristen said, it does not apply the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment or the 14th Amendment. They do not apply only to citizens. They apply to persons in the United States, whether they are citizens or not. They have the right to due process. And due process, folks, is so very, very, very important. I cannot count the many times that I have gone over to the jail to see a client who is locked up in some cell and has pretty much no contact with the outside world. And a part of their due process rights is for me to go over there and talk with them and help them and assist them in court, and to bring them back over to the court so that we can try to resolve the legal issue. Without due process, that person would not have the right to get in front of a neutral judge and try to prove where the government is wrong. So it's basically legally like being, as I heard an attorney say, it's like being buried alive, right? You're in some hole. You're not given the opportunity to tell your side of the story, to show where the government is wrong, et cetera, et cetera. So you're kind of buried alive. That is a terrible place to be in. And therefore, we must fight for due process rights. even if it means giving due process rights to people, bad people, like Trump said. I don't know if the guy's bad or not, but according to the government, he's bad. But even bad people deserve due process in our country under our Constitution. The due process clause is in the Constitution twice for a reason. It applies to the federal government and to state governments. And you better be glad that is there. All right, now let's go back because he's getting ready to answer a question that is extremely, extremely important.
Capable legal people, John Sauer, as you know, and all top people. And I have to rely on that to interpret whatever is said by the Supreme Court. Now, with that being said, I have tremendous respect for the Supreme Court. Look, 3 of the people are people I appointed.
Right.
And I have great respect for the Supreme Court. And I would expect that the Attorney General will be doing the right thing.
Your Secretary of State says everyone who's here, citizens and non-citizens, deserve due process. Do you agree, Mr.
I
President?
don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
Well, the Fifth Amendment says
I don't know.
as
It seems it might say that, but if you're talking about that, then we'd have to have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million trials. We have thousands of people that are some murderers and some drug dealers and some of the worst people on earth.
But
some of the worst, most dangerous people.
So let me just say right there that under the immigration statutes, a person is not entitled to a trial. And let me be very clear on what I'm saying when I say a person pursuant to immigration statutes are not entitled to a trial. Not regarding the immigration stuff, because those things are considered to be civil, administrative, not criminal. Now, if those same people have criminal charges, then yes, they're entitled to a trial. But whether they get deported or not a trial, but they are entitled to a hearing. Not a trial with a jury and all of that, but they are entitled to stand in front of a judge, them and their lawyers, and argue their case. So that is not, when he says, millions of trials would take hundreds of years, we're not talking about a trial where there's a jury, you got to pick a jury, you got to have the opening and the closing and the voir dire and all of that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a hearing that may take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And our Constitution does not equivocate about that. People in this country are entitled to due process. Okay? Now let's go back.
And I was elected to get him the hell out of here, and the courts are holding me from doing it.
But even given those numbers that you're talking about, don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they are going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said. What you said is not what I heard the Supreme Court said. They have a different interpretation.
Is anyone in your administration?
Now, that is the colloquy there that concerns me and many others the most. And here's why. She asked him, will you uphold the Constitution regardless of the outcome? And you heard him say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And I think he went on to say, it depends. And he went on to say that he was relying on the interpretations of the law that his lawyers will give him. Well, let me just say this. President Trump took an oath to protect, to preserve, and to defend the United States Constitution. Okay? Let's listen to it.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
So there you just heard it. There's no equivocation there. He had to take that oath. He had to give his word, his solemn word, that he would, in fact, uphold the Constitution. And so when Christian asked him that question, the answer should have been, absolutely, I will uphold the Constitution. I took an oath to preserve, to protect, and to defend the Constitution. And then, yes, go on to say, I'm relying on my attorneys, however, to tell me how to faithfully execute, how to protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution. It may not be in the way that you think. We may interpret the Constitution different, and then the United States Supreme Court or some judge will tell us whether or not we're right or wrong. But absolutely, I will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution should have been his answer. No equivocation whatsoever. Can't stand behind the lawyer on that because he already pledged to do it. He already gave an oath that he would do it. Yes, go to the lawyer in terms of what the Constitution means and so on. But there is no way to wiggle about whether the President of the United States of America should uphold the Constitution. That is really, really clear. Okay? Now, and here's why it is so very clear. It is required by the Constitution. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 8. It reads, before he enter on the execution of his office, talking about the president, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. And here it is. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States, and I will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And that is precisely what you heard him say. So that should have been a really, really simple answer that absolutely, I will definitely uphold the Constitution. I've already done so. I've already pledged to do so. I've already given my oath to do so. And so the way he answered that question has many people around the country wondering, have we already gone from a democracy to authoritarianism? And the answer is, it depends on who you talk to. Some legal scholars, some government scholars, some political scholars, some people who have studied international politics, global politics, who've studied other authoritarian countries, some of them are saying, yes, we are already in authoritarianism. Others would say no. Some in the middle, we're right there, we're right there. Those who say we are, they look at things like Trump attacking law firms and universities and lawyers and television networks and so on. And those are the things that happen in an authoritarian country. And since they're happening here, then yes, some scholars say we are in authoritarianism. But again, some don't. Some say that we haven't gotten there yet, but we got to fight. We got to fight, or we are right at the verge. We're right on the cusp, right on the precipice of stepping over into authoritarianism. And right now, I tell you, it just seems that the country, is not taking this threat very seriously. I mean, people doing all kinds of things like we are living in normal times, right? Just hanging out, having a good time, partying, and so on, like this is, par for the course. It's not. We're right there, and some believe we're already there. I'm holding out a little hope here. I'm holding out hope that we're not there, and hopefully we can turn this around. And I'm also holding out hope that if some of these scholars are right, that we can reverse it. I have to hold on to hope. I can't become hopeless, nor can you. Nor can you. But we got to act, and we got to act fast. We got to speak out. We got to resist. And I know there's a risk. I know that. I personally know that. I understand. I get it. Absolutely. But if we don't, our silence right now betrays us. One of the biggest things that we need to really gear up for are the midterms. The midterms are really, really, really important because one of the things we've seen or not seen here is we've not seen Trump work with Congress to enact laws which are more permanent than his executive orders. His executive orders are law. Some of you said they're not. They are law. But they are, for the most part, relegated to the federal government. But they're still law, and they still impact our lives. Now, of course, to get Project 2025 deeply embedded into federal law, they need to pass and enact some legislation. But again, do not underestimate executive orders. They are law, and they're binding on, again, federal employees, federal agencies, and so on. So, flipping Congress is extremely important in the midterms. Very important. So that's really what we need to be working on here. Okay? We must make sure that the millions of African American people who didn't vote this time. I did the video recently where we saw 3 African American younger people all saying that they would vote for Trump again, despite the fact that we may already be in authoritarianism or on the verge of it. Despite him attacking civil rights, they still said that. We got a lot of work to do. Okay? All right, thank you for watching this video. I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. As always, stay woke.